New details in the disappearance of Madalina Cojocari, the North Carolina girl who vanished after getting off the school bus. That was back in November of 2022, and Madalina still has not been found. Her mother is now a suspect in the girl's disappearance, but investigators believe she fled the country. Now we're getting even more new information about the days after Madalina was reported missing. That key evidence was likely destroyed when it was burned in the family fire pit. There's also word that Madalina's disappearance may be related to believed sexual exploitation, meaning she could have been involved in sex trafficking. Then there are some questionable messages between her mom and a priest overseas, and an exchange of about $4,000. That's just a preview of the new info we just received this month, but to fully understand it, we've got to head back to the start of the case. Madalina Cojocari was last seen in Cornelius, North Carolina, about 25 minutes north of Charlotte. Here's some info from the Cornelius Police Deputy Chief, Jennifer Thompson.
The investigation uncovered video of Madalina getting off the school bus on November the 21st. It's the last confirmed sighting of the sixth grader.
This video was released in late 2022 by local PD and the FBI. The surveillance video begins with Madalina standing in line waiting to get off the bus. Madalina plays with her hair for a bit before walking off the bus. She exits the frame, and that's the last time anyone for sure saw her. But the world didn't know about her disappearance until weeks later, after Madalina had missed school for 2 straight weeks and a counselor raised the alarm. Here's the Cornelius PD again. They released this video with the FBI.
Our school resource officer and the school counselor tried several times to contact Madalina's mother due to a high number of absences. After agreeing to bring Madalina to school, Diana Cojocari showed up alone, saying she didn't know where her daughter was and hadn't seen her since November 23rd.
Here's the timeline according to court documents. Diana says she last saw Madalina on Wednesday, November 23rd, 2022, when Madalina went to bed. Diana says she got in a fight with her husband, Christopher Palmeter, that night. So the next day, he drove to his family's home in Michigan. It was that day, November 24th, 2022, when Diana says she went to check on Madalina, but she wasn't in her room. Even still, Diana waited until November 26th, when Christopher came back from his Michigan road trip. That's when she finally asked him if he knew where Madalina was. So Madalina wasn't reported missing until December 15th, when her mother, Diana, was called to a meeting with her daughter's school. Here's a quote from an officer who spoke with her at the time. I asked Diana why she did not report Madalina missing until now. Diana stated she was worried it might start a conflict between her and Christopher. Diana and her now estranged husband, Christopher, were later arrested for failure to report Madalina missing, and they each told different stories about that. Christopher, that's the stepdad, suggested that his wife sent Madalina overseas to their home country of Moldova, that's in Eastern Europe. That was the first time any sort of sex trafficking really came up. Christopher apparently told his brother that Diana had a large amount of cash before Madalina's disappearance, but he didn't know where it all came from. When it came time to plea, Christopher Palmeter fought his failure to report charge and went to jury trial last spring.
Your foreperson has reported to the court you found the defendant, Christopher James Palmeter, in 22 CR 366223, guilty of failure to report disappearance of a child to law enforcement. Was this your verdict, sociology? Yes. You may see.
So Christopher was convicted and later sentenced to 30 months of probation. Meanwhile, his wife Diana apparently blamed Christopher for her daughter's disappearance. According to investigators, Diana and her mother discussed the idea that it was Christopher, the stepdad, who gave Madalina away for money. All of this was recorded during a jailhouse phone call because Diana Cojocari served 520 days in jail after she pleaded guilty in the failure to report charge. After Diana served her time, she was released and officially named a suspect in her daughter's disappearance. And around this same time, she left the country. On her Facebook account, Diana posted a picture of herself seemingly on an airplane. The caption read, "On the way from New York JFK to Frankfurt, then to Bucharest after 9 years of absence from the country." Bucharest is the largest city in Romania. That's just driving distance from Diana's native country of Moldova. And it's important to note that Moldova does not have an extradition treaty with the United States. So that's where the story was on our last update. But here's where those new developments come in. A warrant was recently unsealed showing that North Carolina investigators found what they believe was key evidence destroyed at the Cojocari home. Here's straight from the court docs quote. During a conversation with Mr. Palmeter, he stated that between November 23rd and December 10th, 2022, multiple items were burned in a fire pit on the property. Burned items included the victim's mattress, victim's clothing, victim's Halloween costume, and family photos. Investigators also learned that carpet had been removed from the upstairs office space / spare bedroom and also burned in the fire pit. Investigators also found some strange information in Diana's files. According to the warrant, Diana paid a priest in Moldova $4,000 before Madalina's disappearance, which is just a bit bizarre. According to a January 2023 warrant, investigators found a Discord account with 37 unread messages. They said the account seems to belong to a minor. All of that information led to their belief that this case involves sexual exploitation of a minor. And just a reminder, no one has been charged in Madalina's disappearance. Her mom and stepdad only faced charges for failure to report her missing. So let's dig a bit deeper into this case, and for that I'm going to bring in California Police Sergeant Kyle Schoberg. And Kyle, this case has been going on for quite a while, longer than a year at this point. Why is it that just now we're getting all this new evidence or information?
Well, it sounds like they've unsealed the warrant, and so now more information is being uncovered. And what exactly was in the search warrant when detectives or whoever went and searched this fire pit that they found and uncovered a lot of her burned clothing. It sounds like some missing portion of a carpet in an upstairs bedroom was located. So I think as this goes on, it's getting more and more interesting with more and more evidence that they're starting to collect. And unfortunately, since she still has not been found, this is definitely a circumstantial evidence case.
I think you're right in the facts that this warrant was recently just unsealed, so we learned all the information that was collected way back when. Why is it that it was allowed to be unsealed now? I know oftentimes investigators like to keep details closer until the case has completely been solved, but why would they be able to release it now?
Well, if they've hit a roadblock, they haven't gained any further traction in the investigation. At some point, the judge has to authorize unsealing this warrant. And so it sounds like that's where they're at right now. I mean, it's not in reading what they've uncovered or what the investigators did uncover during this search. It sounds like a pretty good circumstantial case in trying to find her whereabouts. I wouldn't be surprised that they're still working on more or to obtain more evidence to find her whereabouts. But in just reading the documentation and the warrants and the things that they did find, there were a lot of troubling things that were recovered in this fire pit.
Let's talk about the fire pit, because this is the huge new information that those of us following the case had yet to hear until just recently. Other cases I've covered, we see people burning things in their at-home fire pit, generally because they don't want this evidence to be around anymore. And you mentioned there was carpet from the upstairs bedroom that had been burned, which is very strange to me. A normal person cooking out or having a campfire wouldn't need their upstairs carpet, and some of the other things, as you said, were troubling. So right away, we're talking about circumstantial evidence. Do you think, you mentioned it was really strong, do you think that that's something that investigators are going to use now?
Yeah, I definitely think they will. I think what's probably happening behind the scenes is the investigators are working closely with the district attorney's office, and all of this evidence has obviously been brought to the DA's office to review, and they're going to be bouncing this stuff off back and forth with each other about what evidence do they have, and does the DA feel that that is enough to move forward with this case? If they believe it's a homicide case, can they get a jury unanimously convict these parents or whoever they feel could be responsible for her homicide beyond a reasonable doubt? And so that's the roadblock right there. Is can they prove their case? Is it strong enough to get a jury beyond a reasonable doubt to prove that they are guilty of this potential homicide?
I think that's the million-dollar question here you touched on, whether this is a homicide, because Madalina has been missing for quite some time. We don't know where she is, so it's possible that she is no longer with us. However, her stepdad and her mom have not been charged with murder. Her mom, we believe, is over in Europe right now. So she did serve some time, and the stepfather was actually charged and convicted in all of this. So they both were charged, but just for not reporting her missing when she was missing for a couple of weeks. So all of this to say, really long-winded, you said that they probably want to lead to some sort of murder charge if possible. Why has it taken so long, and why haven't they even filed this yet?
Yeah, so I think investigators are going to do everything they possibly can to try to locate this young girl. And eventually, if they hit a roadblock and they can say, hey, look, we've done everything we can, we can't locate her, there's no evidence to suggest that she's still alive, I think they have a very good case built up just based on the circumstantial evidence, whether that's against the stepfather or the mother, who was in contact with this priest via WhatsApp, which is a third-party encrypted app that a lot of people use in the criminal world, or anybody that doesn't want someone to be able to track their records of what those messages are. You can't go back and retrieve that because it isn't a third-party encrypted app. So those are all troubling signs. They're all obviously red flags. And so I think it'll come to a point where investigators have said, hey, look, we've done everything we can. There's nothing to suggest that she's still alive, and potentially move forward with homicide charges.
Something you brought up in that answer was the priest and the exchange of money. That came out in these new court documents. Things we're just hearing for the first time, that the mom was speaking with this priest. Very strange. I don't know what to make of it. What does your gut say about that conversation, or those conversations, as there were multiple?
Yeah, well, there were multiple, and it's troubling. I mean, when you stack everything against each other and you just kind of look at the big picture of everything that was going on, I mean, there's an exchange of money, there's these long conversations. They are using a third-party encrypted app. There was all these her burned clothing photographs. I mean, everything just is stacking up towards, unfortunately, she's probably not around anymore. And now the investigators need to put the puzzle together to then present that to the district attorney to file these charges. But it is troubling.
Something else we're hearing from these new court documents is that they believe her disappearance has to do with sexual exploitation. And this is something people have kind of been wondering about for quite some time. Could she be involved in a sex trafficking scheme? Could she have been sold? All of these sorts of things. But what do you think investigators would have found that would lead them to that direction?
So they were using these other encrypted apps that are very popular for gamers, and in the Discord is what was mentioned in the warrant. And in this line of job, those are apps that are used by child predators who do go on there. They do groom these kids, and it's quite troubling actually what comes out of those apps and what kids are doing with these adults that they're chatting with on these um, computer platforms. So I think that's because she had been a part of that. I believe that's probably why they were going down that hole. And like I said, I think they need to explore all options to rule out that she has been sold in the sex trafficking world. And if they can't come to that conclusion, then I think they'll circle back with, she's no longer alive.
Very troubling to even have to think about that. One of the main suspects in the case, though, is the little girl's mother, Madalina Cojocari. And she was involved right from the start. I mean, she didn't report her young daughter missing. So that's a major red flag. She was eventually charged for that. We talked about all of that. But she wasn't listed publicly as a suspect until July of last year. She served her time and she has left America. She is no longer here. We don't know for sure where she is. We think she's in her home country of Moldova, but we can't say for complete sure. So how does that make the investigation even more difficult? The fact that we're doing multiple different continents where we have the investigation and a potential suspect.
Yeah, I mean they'll find out where she is. I mean there are absolutely ways to track her down, and they will find her, and then that's going to be working with in conjunction with the district attorney's office. And if she's in another country, that's going to be a problem in and of itself if she is arrested, to get her extradited back here. Some countries don't adhere to extradition, so that could be a problem in and of itself. I think they'll work that out once they get to that point. But how strange that this mother doesn't even report her 11-year-old child missing for a long time. Now, I guess playing devil's advocate, someone might say, well, that could be a cultural thing with them. I don't know. That's their kid, right? I have kids of my own, and if my kid was missing for more than a couple hours and I didn't know where they were, you can bet that I'm going to report them missing. And try to get law enforcement or whoever I can involved to track them down immediately. So the fact that she didn't do that, the stepfather didn't do that, again, that's just another layer of evidence to add on top of them of what are you trying to hide and why wouldn't you report your daughter missing?
Why wouldn't she report her missing is really the major question in all of this. But you did mention something I want to touch on too, extradition. So the country she's in, Moldova, does not have an extradition treaty with America. So let's say she was found over there. We can't bring her back over here right now in that country. So what does that mean? Would investigators wait until she crossed the border into a country that we do work with?
Yeah, if she goes anywhere outside that country where they adhere to the extradition, then yes, she will absolutely be extradited back here to America to stand trial. So I guess at that point, it's just a waiting game. There's so much more in detail with that stuff that I'm not familiar with because that's just not something that I have personally dealt with. But I do know that it makes it incredibly challenging.
We've talked about a lot of evidence in this case, even things that are just red flags, not reporting the girl missing, the fire pit, all of that. But is it possible that Madalina is still alive?
Sure, anything's possible. They alluded to the fact that maybe she was sexually exploited, and that is very possible. That is a very real thing that does happen, and we're seeing it more and more in law enforcement. And so it is a possibility. Again, I think the investigators are probably going to do everything they can to hopefully, uh, rule out the fact that she has been sexually exploited and she's somewhere being sex trafficked. That would be absolutely terrible for an 11-year-old to have to go through. And so I have no doubt they're working on that. They're going to try to track her down. And like I said, if they come to a point where they've exhausted all resources, everything they possibly can to show that she's still alive, I think charges will be filed for homicide, and they have a great circumstantial evidence case to back that up.
And the investigation is still ongoing because we keep getting updates month by month, it seems, at this point. Where do you think investigators are headed from here, though? I know they've been kind of tight-lipped about some things, but could you have a guess?
Well, I think they're going to want to get in contact with whoever the mom was in contact via that WhatsApp app, right? Like, I know they're trying to contact the priest. Doesn't sound like they're getting very far with that. Probably trying to track her down, figure out where she's at, who she's been in contact with. And they're going to have to just go back and figure out where potentially could this little girl have gone when she got off that school bus that day. I mean, there are so many different variables and options out there that could lead investigators down several different rabbit holes, but I know that every which direction they go, they're going to go as far as they can until they can rule everything out. No stone gets left unturned in a case like this.
And does it make it even more complicated, the fact that she went missing so long ago? So if there was any sort of DNA evidence, for instance, it probably would no longer be there. People could have moved. Witnesses could have forgotten things. Does that just add an extra layer of challenge to this case?
Oh yeah, certainly. I mean, the more time that goes by, the obviously the harder it is to obtain such type of evidence. But I think this fire pit or whatever they located in that fire pit is going to be crucial. If they did find any DNA, obviously that'll be preserved. But yeah, I mean, the longer that this goes on, the more challenging it's going to be. But like I said, I feel like the investigators are going to leave no stone unturned, and that might just take a while.
Hoping for a resolution in the case of Madalina Cojocari. Thank you, Kyle Schoberg, for coming on and breaking down the case for us today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
There's still a $25,000 reward out there for any information that helps lead to Madalina. If you know anything about where she could be, contact the Cornelius Police Department in North Carolina. Reporting for Law&Crime, I'm Gillespie.